Welcome to Renegade Thinkers Unite, a show that will help you transform your marketing from mere messaging to programs that break the rules and make a difference. Join the movement today and learn non-traditional techniques that give you an edge. Now, here's your Chief Marketing Renegade, Drew Nizer.
Shout the words social media in a crowded auditorium and you won't see everyone flee for their lives, but you will inflame visceral reactions from the lovers, the haters, and even the indifferent. Some see social media as the death of reason, others as the birth of true democracy. For businesses, social media can be both friend and enemy, sometimes on the same day, as fans and foes alike express their urgent opinions. And there's a saying in my industry that no one cares about what a brand says on Twitter or Facebook until they screw up. And then hell hath no fury like a social detractor. So regardless of whether or not you personally spend time on social, chances are your target audience, and just as importantly, the influencers of these prospects and customers, are absolutely on social media. So as such, no brand can afford to ignore social media. And more to the point, all businesses need to look at social media as an invaluable opportunity to listen, to learn, to educate, to engage, and ultimately to sell your products or services. So in today's episode, we're going to focus on listening and learning. I'm sure we're going to cover more. But my guest is Kevin Lee, who is the director of marketing at Buffer, a social media management platform. Kevin, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Drew. Thanks for having me.
Hey, it's really fun. And one of the things that Kevin and I were talking about before we got on is that Buffer is like a virtual company with no headquarters. How does that work?
Oh, it's a dream. I can't go back to an office now. It's wonderful. Yeah, we're a 70+ person company and everyone lives and works where they're happiest in the world. So no headquarters, fully remote. We chat on video and Slack and other places, and we find a way to get work done. It's great. You
know, it's funny. We've got, Renegade's a fairly small company as well, but I've got an employee in Vancouver Island as well as, one who is a true vagabond and is currently, in Amsterdam, and he just keeps East Coast hours. So it works. It does work. We have a couple tools we've used that have really helped. But anyway, so here's a funny thing. I have interviewed 200+ marketers over the last few years, and less than 5 of them started their career as journalists. And I think it's amazing because, writing is so important today. Mm-hmm. How important to you, in your role is being a good writer?
Oh, it's everything. I wouldn't be where I am today without that background of journalism and writing. I started my career in content. So I started as a blogger at Buffer and just kind of progressed through the ranks that way. I think in particular, when you get to the director or VP or manager level, it just becomes so much more important because you're communicating through email, through Slack, through all these different, these written media. And, when you're in the manager role, you need to give feedback to some folks sometimes, and that you need to be able to find the right words and say the right things. You need to communicate your strategy and your thinking as clearly as possible. So I'm really grateful for my background. I didn't know I would end up here, but I can see how the pieces kind of fell together to get here.
I have admitted a strong bias towards writer. My opinion is if you can't write, you can't think. So it's very hard to get a job at Renegade if you're don't have writing skills. And it's, I would love to be able to teach more people how to do it, but that's a problem for a different day. So
yes.
You've been at Buffer for more than 3 years, which in my sort of, looking at social media, that's like a lifetime in social media land.
It's so long.
Right? I mean, how have you seen things evolve in terms of your role and sort of the solution that Buffer provides?
Yeah, I think I predate Snapchat, if I remember right. I don't think I had to learn it all since I started. Yeah, social's changed in some really interesting ways. So we have probably the biggest one for us at Buffer. So one of the tools that we offer is scheduling for social media posts. And some of the networks that are coming out now, they have some different restrictions around APIs. So we can't tie into that. We can't schedule a post to Instagram. We can't schedule a Snap, those kinds of things. And so that's like the fundamental behind the scenes, the technical definition of this stuff. But what that means for the users and in practice is social media has shifted from this publishing platform to this engagement platform in my mind. So instead of these one-to-many communications that you have on social, it's shifted to this more one-to-one or one-to-few. And the brands that are catching on to that sooner are the ones that are benefiting, the ones that are seeing some results. So in my mind, that's been the biggest shift. We've shifted our content strategy. We've shifted our marketing strategy from how can we push content out to people to more of a how can we listen? How can we engage? How can we solve problems for people that are out there on social?
I want to put a punctuation point on a lot of the things that you just said because they are so important and so insightful. And you said them so quickly that someone might miss some of the things. A lot of folks, when they start on social, think it's about the content calendar and pushing stuff out. They got their story, they're excited to tell it, and they push it out. And what I heard you just say is, let's not worry so much about that for a moment. Let's make sure that we're really listening to what it is that other people are saying. And then let's figure out from there how our brand fits into that conversation. So let's talk about how Buffer has done that in terms of marketing Buffer.
Yeah, that's a great one. I think, we're talking about being a renegade too. And I think in a sense, this perspective on social media has a bit of a renegade feel to it. So as director of marketing, I do not hold any requirements from my team for ROI on social media. Like, we are on social media because you should be on social media. And I know that sounds probably a bit hippy dippy to say that, but like, that's true. I was thinking earlier this reference of like social media is the yellow pages. And I realized that reference might not resonate with as many people as it used to. But yellow pages, like, people go to social media to find information about you and your brand and your business. So instead of ROI, traffic, these actual measurable things, there are three things that I care about on social media and that our team focuses on. The first one is to be active. The second one is to be on brand. And the third one is to be engaged. And if you're doing those three things right on social, then I think you're rocking social media. And that's what we try to do with our social media marketing.
So let's take those one by one, because I think that that's a really interesting playbook. Let's start with active. What does that mean? I mean, how brands really struggle. How often should I post? And, and so what does active mean, as far as you're concerned?
I heard something once, if you wonder if you're a good parent, you're probably a good enough parent that you're wondering about it. So if you wonder if you're posting enough on social media, you're probably posting enough to be active and you don't need to worry about it. So as long as you're asking the question, you're in a good spot. Truly, it does depend company to company, business to business, industry to industry, what the ideal frequency is for you. It's going to be very custom for you. But as long as you are active in the sense that you publish, once a day, no less often than once a week, then you kind of hit that active spot. You don't want someone to come to your profile and see, oh, they haven't posted in a month or 2 months. It doesn't send the right message. So really, any level of activity is okay, but there is probably an optimal level out there that's custom for you. Yeah.
And I'll talk a little bit later about this because I want to sort of go into this, but, I think that brands, again, I'm going to harp on content calendars, which have become the devil. And so what happens is you see brands that are embracing things like Dogs in Politics Day or National Blueberry Popsicle Month. And by the way, those are real things. And they're so beyond irrelevant to the audience or the business that it's obvious they're just trying, I got to have a post out today. And so let's get one out there. I think the bigger issue when it comes to activity is most activity is crap. It's just garbage. And,
it's filler.
It's just filler. And so, you would never, in the old days of advertising, you would never put crap out there. You would have tested and you would have made sure. I mean, where are you in sort of the quality versus quantity spectrum of things for social?
I definitely resonate with that. Like, we don't want to just be contributing to noise when we focus on activity. I think if you don't have something meaningful to say in a week, then you probably have bigger problems than like what to do on social. So I think a company can find some meaningful way to start a conversation or engage in a conversation on social, at least within a week, preferably within a day. It doesn't always have to be, like we talked before, that word pushing. It's not always you pushing. Sometimes it's you listening and you reacting and you responding. It doesn't have to be about you starting every conversation or putting yourself in every conversation, but like you're saying, Drew, like listening to people. What conversation is our audience having? What things are happening for us that we think our audience will be interested in, rather than the noise and the kind of the vapid posting just to post.
Okay, that's a relief. And so the second the second point that you mentioned is being on brand. Let's talk about that. What does that mean for Buffer?
It's a tricky one. We're in the midst of a brand design project at the moment, so I've been thinking a lot about brand. I see brand as two things on social media. One is the visual look of a brand, and the second is the voice and tone of a brand. And when it comes to visuals, this is where we're putting more and more thought into it. We build a lot of things in Canva. We build a lot of things ourselves because we try to be a bit scrappy and do things as inspiration strikes us. What we're moving toward is a bit more of a universal design language. So we have similar color palettes, similar fonts, similar types of layout to the graphics that we put on social media. So that's one part of it. And the second part is the voice and tone. There's some really wonderful voice and tone guides out there. I think MailChimp has a wonderful one. And we kind of use a voice and tone guide, but I think ours comes back to more of who we are, how much emphasis we place on hiring, how we exist as a company in a way that we are focused on a certain set of values that we want to aspire to. And just those like fundamental things lead us to talk the same way, more or less. So I don't have to put a lot of effort into voice and tone, but we are consistent in our voice and tone. We're positive, we're encouraging, we're helpful, we're experts, we share expertise. So hopefully those two things feel buffery when you're out there on our pages, and that's kind of the intention that we give to it.
Okay, that's a great place to take a break. And when we come back, we're going to talk more about overall social strategy and really get into some specific examples of companies that Kevin thinks are killing it out there. So we'll be right back. Hey, it's Drew. I wanted to use this break to ask you a single question. Are you a courageous marketer? Do you have the courage to go to your board of directors and say marketing could drive the growth of this company? We just need 3 times the budget. Do you have the courage to take the big idea that you already have and extend it internally and externally through influencers, through the media, through all of your content? If you're a courageous marketer but aren't sure how to roadmap all of this, I have a big idea for you. It's called Renegade Thinking. It's a program that we've developed and work with exclusively for B2B marketers, generally at large companies. And I want to give you my cell phone, 917-679-8852. Just text Renegade Thinking to 917-679-8852, and we can talk about how you can cut through. Okay, we're back, and my guest is Kevin Lee, who is the head of marketing for Buffer. So we were talking about your sort of 3 keys to success on social media: being active, being on brand, and being engaged. And I just wanted to throw out something there on being on brand. I think, and this is something that we've sort of proven out with some of our clients, that while you can look at visual language, which is really important, and your voice, that the ideal scenario is that those 2 things ladder up to a larger brand story that connects, that provides a connective tissue, whether it's a visual or the voice. And that brand story is something that has some emotional resonance with the target based on, say, the problem that you solve or your sort of position in the market. But one way or another, there's this unifying story that really holds it all together. And I think in many ways that is the last step in social. It's just not quite there yet. And but there just aren't that many brands that are telling a consistent story. There are brands that are killing it on certain channels just by like being funny, but there aren't very many that have a sort of consistent story, with an exception of a Red Bull or a GoPro, where they're sort of living this lifestyle that sort of always comes through. But anyway, so let's talk about you guys obviously work with, I mean, I think I saw 50,000 roughly paid customers, or at least that's where you were at the end. Let's talk about maybe some of your better customer success stories of brands that have been using you and working with you for a while and really sort of are killing it on social and what that means.
Yeah, there's a really neat brand, Product Hunt, and they're a community that votes up new products and shares new products and discoveries with each other. They've been around for the last couple of years, and they've been loyal Buffer users. We're really grateful for them. They have a few really neat things that they do on social media. They have multiple Twitter profiles, which is one interesting thing. So they have almost like segments within the larger Product Hunt umbrella that are just like one-off. So they would do AMAs every so often. So they would spin off a Twitter account just for their Product Hunt AMAs. They do, they have their main one. They have, I think, a separate product one. Anyway, they have all these different kinds, which is kind of a cool strategy in and of itself. It's a bit of that really delivering to the audience what they want. If you don't want to follow the main Product Hunt brand, you can follow, just the stuff you like. So that was kind of a cool strategy that they did. They also have a lot of technical know-how on the team. So they've built out, using the Buffer API, some automated processes so that, when someone shares something or when a certain product reaches a certain amount, they can tweet or they can schedule something onto social media. So that's part of that staying active, part of using the social networks in like a very obvious and transparent way that, follow this to hear every time that we're going to share this so that people know what they're signing up for. So they've done that really well. They also really excel with the voice and tone stuff, I think. They are big into emoji, which is awesome and great, especially if it's part of their brand, which it is. So they have a neat way of always sharing the right emoji. I'm kind of jealous of how they how they know what all of them mean, first off, but then always know the right one to use in those situations. So they've been really inspiring for us as a marketing team too.
Very cool. We'll put a link to their social channels on the show page, the show notes page. Just for those who aren't aware, AMA is Ask Me Anything, and those are often sessions that typically we're talking about tweet chats where they do these, or they're...
Yes, I think they do them there. I think they also have them on their website.
Okay. So anyway, so that's an Ask Me Anything, and that's a very responsive. And I love the fact that there is a community there, and obviously that's the key. There is that word social in social media that is often forgotten. Oh yeah, wait, this is supposed to be social. So
exactly.
So that sort of merges into your third point of being engaged. Do you have another example, by the way? Because that's a great one of a brand that you think is either listening really well and totally engaged as a result of how they're sort of working with you guys.
Yeah, that's great. There's kind of from a different side of Product Hunt. We're lucky to have the Seattle Times, a newspaper, as one of our customers, and they have put in some really neat things in terms of data tracking and going really deep with the stuff that they post on social. So they're able to know, given this article, how many people shared it from the site itself. So it's almost this idea of owned versus earned social. In general, when we say owned versus earned, we're talking about a channel that you own, like your blog or your website, versus an earned channel like social media, like Medium, something that someone else can control. In this sense of looking at social, you're looking at owned in the sense that this is the content that you put out there yourself, versus earned, which is other people sharing your content through the page, through retweeting, stuff like that. So the Seattle Times has a neat way of measuring both sides. They're able to tell, A, what content is their audience sharing most of, and then B, what content that the Times is sharing that the audience is engaging with. Now, that's a bit of a confusing mix there, but they have this level of insight into, what is resonating. And then, whatever's resonating, they can do more of and do less of the stuff that's not. So it's, again, that element of listening, but kind of listening with a data-informed perspective on things.
And when we're talking about this, because I think it's really interesting that we're not talking to them writing more stories on a topic. It's more about what they choose to share on their social channels, as opposed to, right? That's what.
Exactly.
Okay. So
exactly. Yeah.
And I think that's a really interesting point one of the things that is very easy for brands to do is do sort of what we call content bucket analysis. And as you look at all the areas that you put content out there, whether it's on say your product or your category or how-tos or what's going on in the world, you can sort of bucket all that content and you can measure very easily how, what's resonating with the folks that are following you. So, it sounds like that's what the Times is doing, which is cool.
Exactly. Yep.
So when you, are seeing, because you guys, a lot of content gets shared through you guys. What are some of the biggest mistakes that you see companies doing in their social media?
It's interesting timing. We recently rolled out a new feature on Buffer called a pause button, and unfortunately, it's a bit more relevant recently with all the stuff that has been happening, but it can be, social can be a kind of it's a channel that you need to always be on top of, I guess is the best way of saying it, in terms of what you're sending within the larger conversation of what's happening among your audience or within the world. This is again where listening comes in. So, one thing we do is we have this pause button so that if you have a bunch of content scheduled out, you can press pause and nothing will go out until, you deem it to be an appropriate time to start sharing again. So that's one mistake that I hope we are helping people avoid in the future.
And let me just clarify that, or just wrap a little note around
Yes.
that. So what we're talking about here is there's, the Las Vegas shooting, and
Yeah.
you've got a tweet scheduled that says, "Hey, come on down. We have a concert tonight in Vegas." I mean, really, you could be incredibly insensitive to the situation if you weren't paying attention. And lots of brands, particularly say for companies that don't want their employees to work on the weekends, might schedule all their weekend posts. So that's a really interesting feature. So, okay. So one is just making sure that you are not, that you're sensitive to the world around you, and, you go dark. When in doubt, go dark, in terms of a crisis. Okay. That's
exactly.
Is there, this is one, and when's the coast clear? I mean, this is such a difficult, right? I mean, I don't even, that's a really tricky, sometimes people say, well, it's 24 hours. And I suspect it depends on your brand and the situation.
I don't know if this is good advice, but it's like, you just don't want to be the one to go first sometimes. So like, again, maybe listening, right. Has the conversation within our audience changed? Are other brands starting to kind of shift back into the different conversations? So yeah, that's maybe not the most renegade of thinking to wait for others to go first, but maybe in those times it's called for.
Yeah. So you don't want to be the brand that everybody says #too soon. So,
too soon.
Too soon. All right. So, we're going to take another quick break. And then when we come back, we're going to talk about more good advice for you and your social media marketing. Hey, it's Drew. I was at a conference the other day and somebody looked at my SAW lapel pin and said, "What's up with that?" And I said, well, what's the one thing that marketing has always had to do? Forget digital, forget all this stuff. What is the one marketing imperative? And he looked at me and went, "Cut through." And I went, "Yes, ding, 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 ding. That's right. Cut through. That is what marketing must do." And it's not just cutting through the clutter, although that's really important, because if your marketing doesn't cut through the clutter, it's like the proverbial tree in the forest that falls and nobody hears it. But it's also cutting through the crap and the processes that inhibit innovation. We've been working a lot lately with some CMOs to help them cut through the crap and get at the essence of what is their big idea and how can they make a case to expand that idea across their business. That to me is cutting through. Okay, we're back, and my guest is Kevin Lee, who is VP of Marketing at Buffer. We've been talking a lot about managing your social media. I wanted to step back because I remember noticing, Kevin, that you had put your entire marketing plan for public view. And that to me was just an incredible renegade moment. I was like, whoa, talking about courageous. First of all, what inspired you to do that? And then let's talk about how that worked out for you.
I'm inspired by the team I work with. And one of the things that drew me to Buffer was this emphasis on transparency. It's one of the values that we aspire to. So at Buffer, we've done quite a few crazy transparency initiatives in the past. All of our salaries are public, and you can go out and check out my salary right now if you wanted to. We release stuff like that all the time. We have our roadmap out in the open, so you can see what we're building next, what we're working on at the moment. We had a Facebook Live session, which was just a marketing brainstorm a while back. Just us. I don't know if anyone cared to watch us, but we thought it might be fun for folks to kind of see how a brainstorm session works. So yeah, this is just kind of part of the culture for us. We want to share knowledge with both internally and then also externally with others. We feel it's part of our brand in terms of helping people, we're in this together kind of thing. That's one of the feelings we want to get across. You mentioned the emotions earlier, Drew, which I thought was a great point. One of the emotions we want people to feel when they think of Buffer is, kind of this community feel that they're not in it alone. We want people to feel like we're cheering for them. And so one way to do that is to let them know what we're up to and how things are going for us.
I think that if I were looking at your brand, I think that transparency and the fact that you're living by it, that's your big story. And then, because I think there's an infinite number of ways of executing and celebrating transparency because we live in a world that isn't so. And there was an interesting New York Times article recently on all the brands. This was the trouble that Google and Facebook got in relative to political advertising, and they're using the word increased transparency. But, that's one thing to use those words. It's another thing to put your entire marketing plan on the web. That is transparency.
Yeah.
So that is, as far as I'm concerned, truly renegade thinking. And I'm curious, did you get any feedback did people sort of go, wow, that's amazing?
Well, I think our audience is a bit used to us doing stuff like that. So on the crazy meter, I think we probably topped it with other stuff. Okay. But beyond our audience, I've had a lot of good feedback on it. It's opened up some conversations with peers, which has been wonderful for me. Like as we mentioned, I started in content, so everything I've learned about marketing has been, on the job learning. So I love the chance to bounce this stuff off of other folks. I think that's one of the hidden benefits of transparency is that when you share these ideas, they can only improve once you share them. People will give you thoughts and opinions on them and can go from there. So yeah, it's been great. It's reaffirmed the power of transparency for me.
And so as we're looking at your plan, and there was in transparency to the audience, the listeners, I actually first engaged with Kevin via a HARO inquiry, excuse me. And you mentioned in responding to the question, which is more important for you in 2018, data or sort of brand, and use data. And so I'd love to dive in on that a little bit because you certainly put your data out there. You're at 50,000. You want to get to 250 in terms of sales, but I'm sure that's not what you meant, when you meant data. So let's talk about, that, in connection.
Absolutely. Yeah. And this probably goes back to me, still learning on the job a little bit. One of the areas I have not learned as much as I would like to is the data side of things. So we often view lots of different areas of our marketing in terms of a progression from crawling to walking to running. And so you're doing the most basic things at the crawling stage. You're a little more advanced at the walking stage. And then when you're running, you've really got it figured out. And I would say we're probably crawling with our data at the moment. We're doing stuff like Google Analytics, and we have our social media stats through Buffer. We have Facebook Insights and the Facebook ads information. But beyond that, we don't really have the deeper stuff just yet. The stuff that I'm interested to learn about is, okay, well, we want to do multi-touch attribution for our marketing, say. So we want to know if someone saw a tweet from us, had no idea about Buffer, saw a tweet from us one day, went to our blog the next day, read 5 articles over the next 30 days, then Googled us on the 31st day and then signed up on the 32nd day. Like, how can we track back to all that? And then not only that, how do we know if that person became a really great Buffer customer, in which case we would want to find out how that happened and be able to do more of that. So I think that's kind of the data stuff that I'm at least missing that context at the moment. And I feel like that is a potentially huge advantage for us if we're able to find out all that.
Well, it's certainly the conversation that you will find most B2B marketers when I put out that question. I think we got about 10 responses, and 9 out of 10 said that data was more important to them. And sort of me being the renegade said, if 9 out of 10 are thinking about data, this would be a really good time to focus on brand.
Oh, that's good. That's good data to have, knowing that everyone's focusing on data.
And they really are. And my concern with it is that you fall in love with the tools and the stuff that you can see, and you lose sight of ultimately what it is that we're really trying to do is not measure this stuff, but increase brand love, brand engagement, brand sharing. And while all that attribution stuff is great, it's always, this has been one of the most difficult parts of marketing, figuring out what really matters, in trying to slice it up is very difficult. So, I, on one hand, I get it. I see it. I know we do it for Renegade. We're big fans of account-based marketing and so forth. But, I think that you can get lost there. And I think that's where we're headed really quickly.
That is good to know. I feel like data is like the guilt and the biggest guilt inducing element of marketing. Like if you can it's kind of a buzzword in some ways, like, oh, do you not have the data for that? Or you don't have enough data? Like, right. Maybe I'm just speaking to my own insecurity at the moment, but like anytime I hear data, I'm like, oh, I need to get that. I need to do that. It does have a connotation to me. I connect it somehow quite deeply.
Yes. Well, there's no doubt that, lots of it, particularly big B2B companies that, CMO survival. And I just had a recruiter from a very large, recruiting company say that, the ideal CMO has 5 years sort of on the data side and 5 years on the brand side. So I thought it was pretty interesting.
That's interesting.
Yeah. And part of it is simply to be able to sell. Internally, you need that data to sell, to get more budget, to show that what you're doing is working. So all of that is wonderful, but I want to come back to social as we wrap up this show and just sort of say, if you had a bunch of, say, medium, small businesses listening to the show, and you had sort of 2 do's and 1 don't for them when it comes to social, what would they be?
Oh, that's good. I would first say that you're doing great and you can do it. And I give as much encouragement as possible. I think social is it's probably my insecurity around data is likely their insecurity around social for a lot of small and medium businesses. You hear the word social and you're like, oh, I need to be doing that, but I don't know how, or I don't know what to do or what's enough. I would say if you're a small to medium sized business, the 2 do's, one would be active. This doesn't mean you need to be logging in every day to think up something new to post. You can use a scheduling tool like Buffer. You can do it all on one day of the week and then kind of set it and forget it for the rest of the week. Then the second one would be to be engaged. And so you schedule your content, but then you do a check-in and you have reminders or notifications for when people are reaching out to you. I think if you're a small to medium sized business, that customer connection is really key. And if you're not using social, it's likely that your customers are. Of course, depending on your industry and things like that. But if your customers are using it, then you need to do everything you can to be there. It's a native platform for them, and they're expecting conversation there. So my 2 things would be to be active and then to be engaged with those who respond to you.
And what's the don't?
And then the don't. The don't would be to ignore the engagement side of things. There was an interesting stat, I think, from last year where 20% or fewer of businesses respond to people on social media, which maybe that's one way of renegade thinking is, be among that 20%, be the ones who are responding. That's going to give you an advantage. I think if you ignore folks, it's going to harm your brand. It's going to harm your business and your results. So whatever you can, find someone to respond to folks.
That's a great place to sort of wrap up the show. And as I sort of try to summarize here, early on in social media, my friend Ted Rubin would say, when it came to ROI, there was no return on ignoring. And I think that's a great place. It's true. I mean, we all want to be listened to. And I tell you, if you want to get a hold of me, for example, and for whatever reason you want to do business with Renegade, the fastest way to do it is to follow me on Twitter and retweet something I do and then ask a question. Almost inevitably, I will follow you back and I will respond 10 times faster than an email. I mean, it's just guaranteed and it's amazing. So, but of course I'm attuned to that. So we talked a lot today about just, you got to be in it to win it. For a brand today to not be on social, it says a lot of things, and none of them are good. And ultimately, you're going to want to hire a millennial, and a millennial is going to say, "Wait, you're not on any of these channels? How is that possible?" And I don't really care what business you are; it makes it very difficult. General Electric is very involved in these things. And you say, well, they're selling jet engines. What are they doing there? Well, they're competing for talent against Google and Facebook, and they want to be perceived as a cutting edge, data, as sort of a company that's a technology company. And so that to compete, they need to be in those channels. So again, we get back to the media being the message. So you got to be in it to win it. You got to start by thinking about what it is that you're going to be listening to and to whom. I love that advice about be active, be on brand, and be engaged. I will argue to my death that being on brand is about having a bigger idea and having a brand story that holds it all together, not just social, but content and all your marketing. And that if you do that, you won't ever have any questions about how to fill your content calendar, because it will either be on brand or it won't. And if it will be on idea or it won't. So Kevin, I want to thank you so much for being on the show, and I applaud your company's transparency. It would be awesome if others sort of followed suit.
Thank you, Drew. This has been fantastic to chat with you. I think I've gained as many ideas from you here. This has been perfect. Thank you.
It's my pleasure. All right. And for those of you who have been listening, as always, I thank you for your attention. Feel free to share the show with your friends, subscribe on your favorite podcast channel. And as always, keep those Renegade thinking caps on and strong.
This has been Renegade Thinkers Unite, but it doesn't end there. Just go to renegadethinkersunite.com for more and subscribe to the show. That way, you'll never miss an episode. We'll talk with you next time on Renegade Thinkers Unite.